Sometimes in a real estate transaction, buyers will need sellers to pay some costs for them, and they will include these requests in the offer. So today we're going to talk about seller concessions. What are seller concessions? They come in many forms. So the most popular type of seller concession in a real estate transaction are seller paid closing costs that the seller pays on behalf of the buyer. That doesn't only have to be closing costs, it's not limited to that. It can also be settlement charges, prepaid items, rate buy downs on behalf of the buyer, those types of things. But I've got to tell you, buyers, that sellers don't like to make these concessions unless you've made them a really good offer. So don't come in with some lowball offer and then ask for these concessions, because normally that's not going to work out for you. Another type of concession is the home warranty. Buyers will usually either ask for a 1-year home warranty on the mechanics and the appliances in the offer. Not always, though. Sometimes they wait and just see what the inspector has to say about appliances and mechanical systems before they ask for that. But that's a typical seller concession. That is something that buyers ask the sellers to provide on their behalf a lot of times. Another one is, it's not as popular, but the seller contribution toward an owner's policy of title insurance for the buyer. Sometimes the lenders will have this as a prepaid item included in the closing costs, and other times they don't. So just ask the loan officer if that particular item is included. Otherwise, it's got to be in the contract that the seller's contributing toward title insurance in part or the whole entire amount. Repair allowances. There's a lot of confusion about repair allowances because I'll have a seller who says, well, the carpet's not so great, so let's just offer a carpet allowance. Or the buyer in inspections will ask for an allowance, some amount of money toward a specific repair. Those are allowed if they come in allowable forms, such as the closing cost credit. Vendor checks can be cut to a company at closing only if the lender allows it to happen. Some lenders consider that to set them up for potential loan fraud accusations. So not every lender allows vendor checks to be cut at closing from the seller proceeds. That's something that you need to ask the lender about case by case. Another option is money off the price of the house. So sometimes the buyer will say, hey, take $10,000 off the price of the house for these allowance items or repair items. What you have to remember, though, when you have repair type allowances or carpet allowances, things like that, if the buyer's financing, in most cases, you're not allowed as a seller to just cut a check to the buyer for a certain amount, right? So if you're financing as a buyer, there are certain limitations. You're going to have to fit within this framework of asking for seller paid closing costs, asking for vendor checks to be cut to the company of your choice if they're allowed for repairs, or taking money off the price of the house. Of those possible options, money off the price of the house doesn't put money back into your pocket, so to speak, to get those repairs done. Money off the price of the house for someone who's financing gets stretched out over 30 years. So just keep that in mind when you're seeking repair allowances or allowances for carpet, cosmetic things. Just keep in mind that you don't get to make up the rules for that. You have to follow the rules and stay within the framework of what is legally allowed for you to do. Best case scenario, we don't have to cross that bridge, but sometimes we do. And you can't just do what you want, and buyers do not expect someone to give you money at closing if you're financing, especially. That's just not typically allowed. So those are the types of seller concessions that we have in real estate transactions, and it is possible for the seller to give those concessions when you stay within the contract and what's legally allowed and what's allowed by the lender. If you've got questions about this topic or any other real estate related topic, feel free to reach out to me by phone, text, email, private message. And if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe. Thanks, bye.